All right. Video 2. Gonna continue right where we left off. This explanation doesn't add credibility to the current Sethite version that is most often taught, and the believers of such typically don't read these ancient texts. If they did, is my guess is they would probably disregard them because they are not bound inside the pages of the Bible. But I had one gentleman tell me that he had doubted the Genesis 6 flood narrative until the book of Jasher proved the account to be true in his mind. This helped him understand the reason for the flood because he didn't comprehend or believe it prior to reading these additional excerpts. Do you see how the same story is being told in Jasher, and but with greater depth and detail? There is no contradiction to the Genesis version, but it certainly fills in more blanks and answers some of those questions that most people might wonder about that are absent in Genesis 6. Just think of this for a minute from the Creator's perspective. Every man was making himself his own God from the entities that were in existence at that time. It also alleges that everyone was being robbed and plundered while corrupting the earth, and civilizations acted violently toward each other. This also uncovers a prominent culture of rape that took place during that time. Imagine living in that period in seclusion under constant fear of being taken by force and raped by an evil angel or a giant hybrid. I believe this is why we have found so many underground cities today in the Middle East region and dating back to this pre-flood timeline constructed around 5,000 years ago. People were building underground bunkers to hide from the hybrids and cannibalistic giants. They were not only raping people, but doing the same with animal species and by mixing genus classifications against their kind. Does this sound like the Creator and was being mean? Is when he destroyed all those living things after they went on for hundreds of years by this time? Or could this have been justice delivered to an earth consisting of inhabitants that became so corrupted and evil in nature that it could no longer be allowed to exist? Let's look at another disposition or deposition found in another ancient text, the book of Jubilees, to see what it states about the same period leading up to the flood. And it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon. And they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bare unto them sons, and they were giants. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men and cattle, and the beasts and birds, and everything that walks on the earth. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was thus evil continually. And God looked upon the earth, and beheld, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its orders, and all that were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said that he would destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth, which he had created. But Noah found grace before the eyes of the Lord, and against the angels whom he had sent upon the earth he was exceedingly wroth, and he gave commandment to root them out of all their dominion, and he bade us to bind them in the depths of the earth, and behold, they were bound in the midst of them, and are kept separate. Jubilees, chapter 5, verse 1 through 6. I don't know about you, because some people don't like these ancient books since they are not included in the canonized biblical scriptures. Still, much can be gleaned from reading many of these texts to better understand history in the Bible itself. is what are your thoughts on this? Do these books corroborate the Genesis narrative and help you pull back the curtain on the pre flood age to better understand the Genesis 6 story which led to the flood? This account explains further that all living flesh had been corrupted and was even devouring itself. All flesh had corrupted its orders, and all that were on the earth were continually causing all manner of evil. This was not a situation that could be fixed by any means other than stop it in its tracks. From this account, the author explains that these angels were removed from their dominion and bound inside the depths of the earth in isolation, matching the Second Peter and Jude accounts. These angels were greatly penalized, and the other angels needed to see the consequence of these actions for future reference to enable them to think twice before considering another attempt like this. Let's read the testimony from one more book before we move on, the book of Enoch. Since this reading is so detailed in its account, I'll have to break it up into short segments just to get an idea of some of its descriptions. If you want to read the whole story yourself, I will encourage you to buy a copy or download a free copy from a good website. You'll want to search for number 1 Enoch, which is included in the Ethiopian canon and considered scripture by some, but avoid 2nd and 3rd Enoch, as they are from a different author unknown in source, which also display some theological issues. These excerpts are all taken from 1 Enoch. Enoch 6 verse 1 and 2. And it came to pass, when the sons of men had increased, that in those days they were born to them fair and beautiful daughters, and the watchers, the sons of heaven, saw them and desired them. And they said to one another, Come, and let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men, and let us begat for ourselves children. Enoch chapter 6, verse 5 and 6. Then they all swore together, and all bound one another with curses to it. And they were in all 200, and they came down to Ardis, which is the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called the mountain Hermon, because on it they swore and bound one another with curses. Enoch chapter 6, verse 8 through verse 7, verse 5. Chapter 7, verse 5. These are the leaders of the 200 watchers, angels, and of all the others with them. And they took wives for themselves, and every one chose for himself. And they began to go into them, and were promiscuous with them. And they taught them charms and spells, and they showed them the cutting of roots and trees. And they became pregnant and bore large giants, and their height was 300 cubits. These devoured all the toil of men, until men were unable to sustain them. And the giants turned against them in order to devour them. And they began to sin against birds, and against animals, and against reptiles, and against fish. And they devoured one another's flesh, and drank the blood from it. Enoch chapter 8, verse 2. And there was great impiety and much fornication, and they went astray, and all their ways became corrupt. Enoch chapter 9, verse 8 and 9. And they went into the daughters of men together, lay with these women, become unclean, and revealed to them these sins. And the women bore giants, and thereby the whole earth has been filled with blood and iniquity. Enoch chapter 15, verse 3. Why have you left the high, holy, and eternal heaven, and lain with women, and became unclean with the daughters of men, and taken wives for yourselves, and done as the sons of the earth, and begotten giant sons? Enoch chapter 10, verse 1 and 2. And then the Most High, the great and holy one, spoke and sent Ars Yalaher to the son of Lamech, or Noah, and said to him, say to him in my name, hide yourself, and reveal to him the end, says which is coming, while the whole earth will be destroyed. A deluge is about to come on the earth, and all that is in it will be destroyed. Enoch refers to these angels as the watchers, or watcher angels. It should become evident to the reader who has not been exposed to the pre-flood story that angels, sons of God, committed a great offense and destroyed the earth with their desire to bear children and teach men things that were forbidden. Their gigantic Nephilim offspring, known in Genesis as the mighty men of old, the men of renown, became terrors to the rest of the world by sinning against cattle, birds, reptiles, fish, and other animals. They even went to the extreme of eating humans and drinking their blood because they could not satisfy their immense hunger. Now we can see another reason for these underground cities' existence. These civilizations hid to avoid being raped and pillaged and concealed themselves to giants so giants wouldn't eat them. These eating machines were so evil that they consumed the flesh and blood of humans created in God's very image for dominion of the earth. Looking back to this era, I believe this dominion was stolen from mankind during this time. Aside from these massive evil giants, imagine the hybrids birthed into this world is when they cross seed with reptiles, birds, and fish. This would be the origin of some of the monstrous creatures we think of today as dinosaurs. I do not believe whatsoever that the pseudoscience world is showing us any legitimate illustrations of species that they claim to have lived millions of years ago, but artistic representations of these reptilian monstrosities that were hybridized during the pre-flood period. This enables them to explain unknown findings by having a narrative in case someone comes across a buried bone or a strange skeleton. This dinosaur narrative is dual purposed to also discredit the biblical account, further keeping people from the knowledge and reality of the corrupted past. Behemoths, mastodons, excuse me, leviathans, dragons, and things of the like did exist and are corroborated through multiple means, but these renderings of T Rex, among other cartoon renderings and models, are pure fiction. There has never been an entire or even partial skeleton that has been recovered resembling some of these alleged dinosaurs promoted. Every displaced skeleton is a complete large-scale fabrication created by artists to brainwash the masses to accept the theory of evolution and bring in ticket fairs at museums, but I am digressing here again. Knowing the degree of irrevocable lawlessness in Noah's day, would it have been more benevolent to humanity for God not to send the flood? Think about this. If you take issue is with the Most High for sending this cataclysm. If he hadn't, I assure you that we would not be here today to read about it, nor would there have been a Messiah that would have come through the bloodline of Eve as it is prophesied, excuse me, in Genesis 3:15, through Noah's pure blood family that became the remnant saved by that flood. The flood was undoubtedly punishment for evil on the earth that would be eradicated from the flow of great waters. Still, it was also the very thing that saved Noah and his family, preserving humanity by allowing it to continue to bring forth a future Messiah for the entire human race. On the topic of the Messiah, I have to reveal one more thing to you before proceeding to the next portion of this chapter. As we read in Enoch chapter 6, verse 5 through 6, that the angels came down to the summit of Mount Hermon and made a pact there, is where they swore and bound one another with curses. Mount Hermon is the single highest mountain in Israel, standing about 9,000 feet above sea level, where it borders Syria and Lebanon. This mountain was also referred to as Baal Hermon, after Baal, the god of the Canaanites, who was said to have lived on this mountain. In addition to this mountain's significance, the Romans even called this mount the Rock of the Gods, probably declaring its prominence as a notorious landing site of the Watcher Angels. The mountain's base sits in an area called Caesarea Philippi and has a significant history of pagan worship where the god Pan also had considerable prominence. So, what is the significance of this mountain to the topic of the Messiah? This is where Jesus took his disciples and asked them who they thought he was. Here is his brief exchange with Peter at the base of Mount Hermon at Caesarea Philippi. Matthew chapter 16, verse 15 through 18. He said to them, but who do you yourselves say that I am? Simon Peter answered, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. Jesus took his disciples to the location believed to be an ancient gate to the underworld or Hades. At this site, he asked Peter who he was, and for the first time it was acknowledged that he was the Son of God. Jesus replied to Peter, Upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. Do you think the dark pagan history wasn't on Jesus' mind when he laid this claim to his disciples? Is following this event, Jesus took them up 6 days later on what is known or what is now understood as Mount Hermon, where he was supernaturally transfigured before them. This is Matthew 17, verse 1 through 9. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up on a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became as white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to him, talking with him. Peter responded and said to Jesus, Lord, is it good that we are here? If you want, I will make 3 tabernacles here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. While he was still speaking, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, is with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. And when the disciples heard this, as they fell face down to the ground and were terrified. And Jesus came to them and touched them and said, Get up and do not be afraid. And raising his eyes, he saw no one except Jesus himself alone. And when they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead. I think there's tremendous significance to this circumstance. Is well over 3,000 years after the angelic incursion, Jesus was transfigured at the most historical pagan-rich location on earth, where the sons of God came to bind themselves in a pact to destroy the prophesied descendant of Eve, who would someday crush Satan's head, as they made a purposeful attempt to commence a seed war to build their army of offspring, which became angels, to nullify the Genesis 3:15 prophecy and foil the plan of the foretold descendant. This would become the same location where Jesus was revealed to be the Son of the living God, who came to build his church where false dead gods were historically worshipped. He would affirm to his disciples that he was the Son of God, and God confirmed this through the voice in the bright cloud by stating, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Even so, Jesus did not want them to share this event with others until after his resurrection. Could Jesus have done this to spite the fallen angels and pagan gods that had such prominence at this location for all of history? I think he revealed himself as the true Son of God purposely at this very place where the rebellious sons of God and the gates of hell were associated. Considering these things, the claim he made to build his church from the site of his transfiguration at Mount Hermon is far more significant than we understood. Could there have been more sins committed by the sons of God other than those noted in Genesis 6? I would argue yes, and we will cover some of that in the next chapter. But now that we have touched on fallen angels and referenced some of their offenses that occurred in the pre flood context, it's time that we discuss these ancient giants that appeared on the earth once again after the flood. Now, post flood giants. Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. And the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. To start this section of post flood giants, let's first define the word Nephilim from the Merriam Webster's dictionary. Nephilim, a biblical race of giants or demigods. Reading this opening passage in Genesis chapter 6 verse 4 alludes to what I would define as one of the more puzzling aspects of biblical history. This verse is a critical component of the Genesis 6 narrative as documented sometime in retrospect after the flood, and this statement is chronicalized while leading right into the flood history. This documents that Nephilim, giants, were on the earth in those days before and also at some point after the flood. Researchers who study giants and their hidden history are equally perplexed by this statement and its ramifications. As one can imagine when considering this circumstance, after a total wipeout of a worldwide flood, how in the world did giants get back on the scene after that? I will tell you in advance that there is no way to prove how this happened after the flood, when giants were somehow brought back into common existence. But they were not only present in increasing prominence shortly after the flood, but even into modern times to a lesser degree. I will briefly run through the most common theories regarding how their return could have been possible in a post-flood world. Here are the four main theories considered as the most likely options, and each possibly is believed by people today as the cause. Number one, excuse me, there could have been a second incursion from another rebellious group of angels that did a repeat of the first group. Although many hold this perspective, I would not consider this likely, as it is not stated anywhere in the scriptures that this offense happened again. Also, the angels were well aware, of the penalty inflicted upon the other angels, is which should have been a great deterrent. Despite the unlikely probability in my mind, this theory is believed by some and cannot be ruled out as impossible. Number two, some believe Noah's son, Ham, may have married a woman with corrupt genetics, leading to giants appearing in post-flood genealogies again. Most of this post-flood giant ancestry is traced back to the descendants of Ham's lineage, which is why this is a possibility. Number three, others believe that some giants actually survived the flood. Some ancient legends speak of this, but are not the most credible sources. I see some theological issues with this option, but this is another theory that cannot be corroborated and seems extremely unlikely, but not necessarily impossible. There may have been some post-flood ritual that could have taken place, which somehow allowed giantism to resurface in the population. This is believed because Genesis chapter 10 verse 8 speaks of Ham's son Cush, who had a son named Nimrod, that states, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. The last phrase from theory number 4, explaining how Nimrod began to be a mighty one, is very suspicious that something strange may have taken place, leading to giantism in his case. This description of how he began to be a mighty one in the earth is oddly similar to the mighty men of old, men of renown describing the Nephilim. This occurrence of mighty one translates from the Hebrew term gibor, meaning strong, mighty, or powerful, but can also mean champion or even giant. Gibor comes from the plural term Gibarim, which can also be translated as giants. It is possible that Nimrod may have done something intentional to grow into a mighty man, which gave him the ability to achieve the form of a giant. Is it possible that he initiated a ritual encouraging demonic inhabitation by channeling a spirit medium that increased his size and strength? This may seem like a bizarre option, but this use of the word began in Hebrew 2490 or chalal in Hebrew, which means to pollute, defile, profane, desecrate, or begin. These terms can be further explained by taking place through a ritual or sexual act. Based on this wording, combined, says, with the power and influence that Nimrod had, the builder of the Tower of Babel, this fourth option cannot be taken off the table. Is option 4 more likely, or could it be as simple as the second theory suggests, that there may have been giant DNA present in the offspring of Nimrod's father, Cush, from the wife Ham selected right before boarding the ark? Could there have been a combination of efforts or effects resulting in this state based on genetics derived from Ham's wife combined with some form of witchcraft or curse? As we know that the primary culprit for establishing these lines of giants primarily derived from Noah's grandson Canaan, brother to Cush, who was cursed for an incident when his father Ham wronged Noah. Although this is slightly off topic, as a sidebar, as we should be aware of this event between Noah and his three sons to see why this option could be viable. Let's read it. Genesis chapter 9, verse 21 to 25. He, Noah, drank some of the wine and became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and his two brothers, and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were turned away, so they did not see their father's nakedness. And when Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan, the servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." In this instance, and many researchers speculate that something evil took place that was far more depraved involving Noah's son Ham on this night. The explanation of seeing his father naked could be documented in a way that omits censored detail about this particular evening. Still, I will not elaborate further on these speculations of what might have happened. The important thing to note is that something unlawful took place that was very wrong to Noah, and because of it, Noah cursed Ham's son Canaan. This grandson, Canaan, who received this curse, appears to be the root forefather of many giant tribes plaguing the Promised Land territories throughout most of the Old Testament. This manifestation of giants present within the borders of the Promised Land took place over about 1,000 years, starting in the time of Abraham and ending around the time of David. In this curse of the grandson Canaan, that direct cause is this curse of the grandson Canaan the direct cause of post-flood giantism? Or could this curse be combined with the genetics of his mother, Ham's wife, that sparked off a gene of gigantic proportions in Canaan and subsequently all his offspring? There is no way to be exactly sure how these giants came to be after the flood, but I can say with some level of confidence that the giants before the flood were much larger than the more diminutive in stature post-flood giants. Many people familiar with Old Testament stories know the story of David and Goliath. To paraphrase, Goliath was a 9 to 10 foot tall Philistine giant who was killed by young David, who wielded a sling and 5 stones. Coupled with a rock solid faith that his God Yahweh would help him to defeat the provoking heavyweight. After David faced off to battle and struck the giant in the forehead with his stone from the stream, He grabbed Goliath's own sword from his sheath and cut off his head. This is the Cliff Note version of David and Goliath battle paraphrased. Like many popular Bible stories, some people view this as a tale because David was young and no match for a seasoned warrior like Goliath. But most people write off this story as a myth because scripture records Goliath in this strange and unfamiliar manner as a giant. But Goliath was not a single stray giant that randomly grew larger due to a rare condition known as gigantism. He did not have an overactive pituitary gland that produced an abnormal amount of human growth hormone, causing him to achieve great stature, as some explain. As we know this because Goliath had four brothers, also known as giants, proving a genetic attribute in his family's ancestry. Could this explain why it is documented that David selected 5 stones from the stream, believing that he would undoubtedly lay down Goliath? Did he grab 4 additional stones as backup ammunition for the potential retaliation of Goliath's 4 brothers? I think this is reasonable. Why he had picked 5 stones, which would further demonstrate the confidence and faith David held in the Most High, giving him power over these enormous men. Battles against giants constitute a significant feature of the Old Testament that I believe is overlooked while shrouded in complete misunderstanding. Unfortunately, too many modern teachers lack an understanding of these old battles and don't seem very interested in teaching this topic. This bothers me because many of our youth today ignore the Bible's relevance to the supernatural and the intriguing stories of the past. Today's youth are very interested in stories of titans, superheroes, angels, and demons, but never get to see the biblical narrative from which all these things derive. As a result, they are only exposed to the demonic side of the occult, which props up these beasts as heroes. Teachers, please learn the content of this chapter and start teaching our youth the biblical side, which explains these matters and how they connect. You will see them finally take an interest in learning the truth from the scriptures and understand a broader scope of historical supernatural battles pertaining to an ancient seed war. Come on, y'all, let's equip the saints for the work of ministry. There were giants accounted throughout the Old Testament, and the Israelites were commanded to defeat them and kill every man, woman, and child of these groups. This method of murder is an area of contention with atheists and agnostics alike, who point out the problem of how God commanded his people to overtake many nations, kill all the people, and keep their land as a possession. But if it were commonly known today that the tribes were inhabited which inhabited these lands consisted of evil groups of giant civilizations, would that change the entire perspective of people's views of what took place during this time? The Israelites were told to overtake certain groups and not intermarry with them. I was always told this was because the Israelites were special people and were not supposed to intermingle with other nations. But nobody ever mentioned it was because these were nations of giants that needed to be extinguished from the land God held in reserve for his people. Could most of these battles have confused people in our time to the point of being irate and with the Most High and becoming atheists be attributed to removing dangerous hybrids of antiquity? Perhaps giants who needed to be overcome with God's help, similar to how God helped David defeat Goliath. There are many of these battle occurrences, so many that we cannot dissect them all, but we will explain several circumstances so the reader can see what was largely happening during this time. Let's begin at a place where this becomes clear to see in context. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 1 through 5. And then I'm gonna end it here so you can digest this. When the Lord your God brings you into the land where you are entering to take possession of it, and he drives away many nations from before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And when the Lord your God turns them over to you, and you defeat them, you shall utterly destroy them. You shall not make a covenant with them, nor be gracious to them. Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them, and you shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take your daughters for your sons, their daughters for your sons. For they will turn your sons away from following me, and they will serve other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. But this is what you shall do to them. You shall tear down their altars, smash their memorial stones, cut their asherim to pieces, and burn their carved images in the fire. So, that's the end of video 2. Then we're going to pick right back up video 3.